This is the outgoing Dunlop FX 500 Tour, one of the highest potential frames in my opinion, but also one of the most disappointing in the last releases, again in my opinion. It's so interesting because some of its specs are quite interesting and unique next to the market, and this version was disappointing because in my experience most of them that we found on the market were always underweight. They ended up platform rackets, and there was something about the quality control that really didn't allow this racket to shine and live up to its potential. This is the new Dunlop FX 500 Tour. There are some engineering and spec updates. The power boost frame geometry has been changed a little, so there's an increase in the beam thickness in certain areas, and we have the addition of power boost grommets that we'll discuss. But a lot of the specs remain the same, and I think they're quite interesting. It's a 98 square inch frame, it's a 16 by 19 pattern, nothing new there, but it does have a variable beam, and it has a really interesting, relatively open string pattern. And it has the FX's quite maneuverable throat that I talked a bit about in the review of the standard FX 500. Here's that string pattern. As you can see, that hasn't changed, and let's check out those power boost grommets. If you've watched my standard FX 500 review, then you'll know that I really liked the power boost grommets in the addition to that frame, because I think it added a little bit more power, a bit of dwell time onto the string bed and enhanced the feel. So this racket has huge potential because it comes from a line that is quite underrated in my opinion. The line offers good feel, excellent power, and usually good stability. So let's see if this racket that I had to demo is on spec. As you can see, it's encouraging. It was overweight, but at least the swing weight, which I think is a really important measure, is close to what the target is at 322. So why is this racket so high potential for the market? Why could it have such a big impact? Well, I think it can compete across two very popular categories, and I think it can compete with some market leading frames. Of course, the obvious competitor is the E-Zone 98, and I'll discuss why I think this will suit some players over the E-Zone 98. It also can compete against, however, power and control frames that also offer a lot of spin. So think of the Head Extreme Pro and the Babolat Pure Aero 98. This racket with its open pattern and that maneuverable throat can potentially generate a lot of spin, and I think it can compete with them too. But also with that variable beam and the feel that you get with this frame, it can also, I think, compete with rackets like the Radical MP. So this potentially has quite a broad customer base, albeit within a target group that is relatively advanced. So how does this racket feel? I think the good news here is that the feel in this FX 500 Tour seems to be unanimous across all the new releases. The FX 500 that I reviewed, I really enjoyed the feel and described that as being something that was standout positive against some of the competition. And that's the case here. You really do feel connected to this frame. You know where the ball is hitting the string bed, and next to the E-Zone that is really muted, I think that's a really good thing. Next to the Extreme Pro, which is a little bit pingy at times, I think that's a really good thing. But you do also get that relatively crisp response that you get from like a Radical MP, but actually prefer the dwell time that you get on this. So overall, particularly for advanced players, I think it delivers a real connected feel. So what about power? Because after all, this sits in the Dunlop power line. Well, power, as you would expect, is good, and it is enhanced, I think, by those two changes that they've made around the geometry and the power boost grommets. So you get that nice combination of that little bit of dwell time through the power boost grommets, but I think also the spacing of those grommets means that you get a little bit of extra string movement and snapback, good power as a result, which brings to life that open pattern a little bit. Crucially, I think also that power boost grommets has improved what I struggled with a little with the last edition. I always found it to be, on paper, should have been offering a lot of spin potential, and I felt that it was a bit disappointing in that regard. I actually made comments that I felt that I could generate more spin with other frames that weren't spin orientated, and I think that is most of the way there to being fixed with this frame, maybe due to those power boost grommets and maybe due to the frame being sort of shored up a little bit. Another standout that I think makes this a really encouraging and exciting option for advanced players is its maneuverability. I talk a lot about that bottom of the hoop of the FX 500 Tour, and it is super maneuverable, and that carries across all of the FXs. In the FX 500 that's really needed because it is such a stable frame with a massive twist weight. Don't think that this is as stable, but it is still very maneuverable, so you can generate a lot of racket head speed. So there's all of the positives. To balance that, here are some of the potential negatives that I've found with this frame. So first of all, I think the sweet spot is not the biggest. This isn't the most forgiving frame. So when you're hitting with the frame, if you connect towards the top of the hoop, you can feel a little bit of fluttering. And also if you're slightly off center, across 3 and 9, you feel some fluttering as well. So of course the conclusion is that this isn't the most stable. I actually think that the sweet spot in the engineering on this Dunlop FX 500 Tour is quite significantly different to the E-Zone 98. And you'll find some players will really get on with this over the E-Zone, and others will really get on with the E-Zone over this. And that will be because the sweet spots fundamentally sit in a slightly different position because of the isometric head on the E-Zone 98. I also think that with the E-Zone you get a slightly lower launch angle, so some might prefer some of the directional control that you'll get from the E-Zone in that regard, but others will get higher percentage play out of this if they have a higher percentage of points that they lose from hitting into the net. Now that of course brings positives and negatives. I did find that this racket was spraying a little bit when I was first hitting with it, particularly on slices and particularly on hitting out in aggressive shots. There was a few shots that I felt I would have made with other frames that I didn't with this, and it did take me a bit of drilling and adjustment time to get into that. The other thing that I felt was the stability here I think can be improved, and bear in mind that I've just reviewed this regular FX 500 which really is rock solid, and I felt that FX 500 gives you slightly easier depth and better returning ability, and of course the FX 500 does offer really good control and good power, so in some respects, stiff competition to this frame is actually its big brother. And I think many people will probably perform better with the regular FX 500 than they will compared to this. So I think the other thing that is a possible negative with this frame is the fact that it will perform better with customization. So I think again that limits the market for this a little. I don't come across too many people who want to experiment with lead and change their balance points. Obviously they can go to professional customizers, that's a service that I offer too, but I do think this is a frame that potentially can be shored up a little bit, and is something that should be considered maybe still as a very advanced player's platform stick. So who is it for? I think this is for very advanced players, and I think it is for players who like to attack. I was getting the most performance out of this frame when I was playing well, moving my feet well, and playing aggressive tennis. It's good on serve, you can really hit your targets, and it's powerful on serve. And if you set yourself up and really hit out on your second shot, this is a really effective weapon. It's quick enough as well to put balls away at the net. I don't think it's got leading stability at the net, but it does an ample job. So players who like to get onto the front foot and hit out, I think will really enjoy this frame. I don't think it is for baseline huggers who are just interested in slogging from the baseline. I think actually the E-Zone performs better in that regard. The E-Zone 98 is slightly better on defense because of the sweet spot, and I think the Dunlop FX 500 itself is better in that regard. So I think this does definitely have quite a defined target group, but it is a big improvement on the previous edition. In terms of competition, so it does come down to your swing mechanics, whether you'll prefer this as to the E-Zone 98, and also of course the feel is different. If you enjoy a muted feel, then you'll probably like the E-Zone. I think with this as well, you need to put your tension up a little bit higher than you might necessarily think you would with a 65 RA. The string bed is quite open, it can be a little bit erratic, so you need to be hitting within this the sweet spot, and if you go too low, then I find that it can be a little bit sprayy. So that is another thing to consider, is that this is going to push the boundaries of what is comfortable for people who can play with it effectively. Hope that was helpful. More reviews coming up. Please do subscribe to the channel because that really helps and enables me to do more. And I'd love it if you could give a like to this too, to show that you're enjoying the content that I'm making. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.